This is an RNZ podcast.
A big kia ora to Hayden Donnell, who joins me in the Auckland studio. Hello.
Kia ora, Emile.
It is an RNZ-centric midweek media watch tonight, Hayden.
It is.
And we are starting with a story that ran on RNZ about an anorexic teenager who starved to death in a motel room in 2023. This story absolutely devastating to read, really confronting. And RNZ's story about this has been controversial.
Well, its editorial calls have been controversial. And yes, this is a story, as you say, about a teenager that starved to death in a motel, emergency accommodation. And it seems that there are real points that you could question in terms of his care. One that sticks out was shortly before his death, he collapsed while seeing people from Family Works, which was the agency that found him emergency accommodation. There were points like this where you could say, hey, could this person have been saved? And there is a coronial inquiry that is taking place into his death, and some of those questions will undoubtedly be asked. But a lot of the consternation about RNZ's story in this case stems from the fact that this person was a transgender male, and the story, RNZ's story, is told almost entirely from the perspective of his parents who didn't accept his gender identity. So that gave rise to quite a number of contested editorial calls. So for starters, the big one, this story repeatedly refers to this dead teenager with female pronouns, and it uses his parents' chosen name for him, which is Vanessa.
But RNZ has rainbow reporting guidelines, which would guide your coverage of a story like this, wouldn't they?
Yeah, on the face of it, and this would on the face of it be in conflict with RNZ's rainbow reporting guidelines. There is just one relevant section in the rainbow reporting guidelines here, and that says a person who identifies as a certain gender should be referred to using the appropriate pronouns.
A person who identifies as a certain gender should be referred to using the appropriate pronouns.
So if you identify as a man, you get called he. If you identify as a woman, you get called she. If you identify as non-binary, it's they.
So how does that seems to conflict with this story? So how does RNZ justify using those female pronouns and the parents' chosen name?
Yeah, so this is the journalist who wrote the story, Ruth Hill, on Morning Report.
Vanessa was transgender. Usually, as you know, RNZ's policy is to opt to use the name and pronouns that the people tell us that they use. In this case, Vanessa is dead and can't tell us. So our treatment of the story online has been to use the different perspective of the people who are talking about Vanessa.
Now, this Ruth Hill said after that the parents had told her that in his final weeks of life their child was rethinking his gender identity. So this was another part of it that Ruth Hill brought up.
Okay, so because the parents saw their child as female, and because the child was not around to object because they are dead, we're going to use the terminology the parents prefer because the parents are the ones who are speaking for this story? Or
just the people in general speaking to us prefer, because there are other people in the story that use different pronouns, and those pronouns are used. There's they used, there's he used. I think that this approach that Ruth Hill spells out there throws up quite a few questions. My first one is, what does this mean for other trans people? If this is our broad standard that we're applying here, do they need, because lots of trans people have people in their lives that don't accept their gender identity, of course. This is a relatively common thing. Mm-hmm. Do trans people then need to express their preferred pronouns, their gender identity in some kind of writing or legal fashion, or make it incredibly clear to the media before their death in order to not run the risk of being dead named or misgendered, something like that, by New Zealand's public broadcaster? My approach, the one that I would think would be sensible, would be to look at the available evidence, what people preferred in life, what they wanted to be referred to in life, and then continue that in death unless they give, or unless really very hard prevailing counter evidence is offered.
Do you feel like that is a symptom of a wider issue with the story then?
Well, the wider issue with the story and what people have identified as a criticism of it is that it is all told just about from the parents' perspective, and there's very little in the story that actually sticks up for this dead teenager and their view of their own identity, their view of what their gender is. There's no, maybe the reporters sought it, but there's nothing in the story from peers or people that supported the teen in that identity.
I mean, is there not an argument that this story is from the parents' point of view? It is the parents' story, and to unilaterally change the language that the parents use would be to be disempowering them.
Yes, I can see that that is an ethical conundrum that the editors and the journalists probably ran into. Now, I just go back to what it would be like if it was another story about another thing and the person at its centre wasn't dead. Would we then discard the rainbow reporting guidelines? If it was about another topic, a crime or whatever, and it had a matter of it had a family involved and some people in the family didn't accept someone's gender identity, would we then, when quoting those non-accepting family members, not use the correct pronouns for that person? No, that would conflict with the rainbow reporting guidelines. That would probably be seen by that person as disrespectful to them. Why do we do that in death? I think a lot hinges on what Ruth Hill says in that clip. We don't know what this teenager wanted. She says, we don't know what this teenager wanted, so we're just going to go with whatever someone is telling us they want for that teenager. Now, I don't really accept that that was an unknowable fact in this case.
You talk about we don't know. Shortly after that, or a couple of days after that piece was published, there was another piece published by David Farrier on his Substack blog, Webworm.
Yes, and this is why I don't say it's an unknowable fact. Now, disclaimer here, I have written for Webworm. I've known David Farrier since we were in uni together. We've been friends for a long time, but this is his story. It's not mine, and so...
Were you involved with it at all?
Well, I knew about it.
Okay.
And I knew about these messages, but David made the editorial calls and he wrote it.
Cool. Thank you.
But I was aware of these messages because they were being talked about and they were being offered to various journalists and that kind of thing. But there are 6,000 messages that David Farrier went through. And they were posted by this teenager at the centre of the story on a semi-public web forum in the 2 years before his death. And from those messages, we can tell that, look, I'll just give you the key notes here. Look, this person was firm in his gender identity, contrary to the insinuation that maybe he wasn't or that he wavered. He actually, his relationship with his parents was a source of a lot of pain. It's very evident in the messages there. He was pained that they wouldn't accept who he saw himself as. And also the thing that we get from these messages is that he preferred the name Alex and he preferred to use he, him pronouns.
You may have addressed this before, sorry if I didn't hear it. How did David Farrier come upon these messages?
So through an intermediary is my understanding that the forum moderator of this forum that Alex interacted obviously quite prolifically on actually sent out some of the messages because they didn't believe that Ruth Hill's story accurately reflected Alex and actually thought that the story would be seen as maybe an insult by Alex and offered it to various people. David Farrier was one of them. I know another one that has been mentioned is David Fisher at the Herald.
RNZ might
So sorry, through an intermediary actually, through an organisation called Rights Aotearoa. So from the forum moderator through an intermediary to the journalist. This is my understanding.
Okay.
Yes.
So are we to understand that RNZ did not have access to this material?
Well, this is actually, it doesn't seem like before they went to print that they did.
Okay.
But I have seen emails from the forum moderator to Ruth Hill, or one email, offering her these messages. And the message from the forum moderator says, Alex would feel horribly betrayed and disturbed, essentially, by the life story that you've given him, and then it actually attaches quite a few messages, and it did go to Ruth Hill's accurate RNZ address. I've seen it. I don't know what happened to it. What I understand is that RNZ has said, we haven't seen this message, we don't know where it is. Perhaps it was flagged by virus software. Who knows? But I know that it did go to the right address.
Out of interest, do you think there is a potential ethical conundrum in using 6,000 messages posted on what you described, I think, as a semi-public forum as part of a story on David Farrier's behalf?
I definitely think that is a difficult editorial call. And something that I kind of wrestle with when I think about it. This person wouldn't have thought that these messages would have been used in this context, but they wouldn't have probably suspected that this context could exist, that their story would be told in this way on RNZ. And so there's people that are extrapolating out from their words. Some of their words seem to indicate that they wanted their story to be told. For instance, they said, look, one of their last wishes, this is expressed in some of the messages, was to a friend, and they said, look, I want you to write a book about me. I want people to know how bad eating disorders can get. There was some indications that they wanted their story to be told, and there's also this real sense that from friends and peers on the forum, I think that the incomplete story that RNZ told could not go unanswered, and that maybe Alex would not want it to go unanswered. And so this is what was really missing in RNZ's story, Alex's voice. And it was really nowhere to be found, who they were, what they wanted for themselves, what they saw themselves as, and what they saw their story as. And so it felt like this was a way of getting that voice out there. And so that's probably why the call was made. But I can totally accept that it's a difficult moral choice to make, because the person cannot consent to it.
I have seen some complaints that this story was pushed by, or accusations perhaps, that the story was pushed by a group that lobbies against affirming transgender identities.
Yes, so this story was actually, it seems, this is what Rights Aotearoa and others have said, and including anti-trans advocates, activists have said thank you to this person for pushing the story out there. So this person called Fern Hickson from Resist Gender Education Aotearoa is apparently working with the parents, or has a connection with the parents, and seems to have shopped it to the media. And this is obviously a group with a very strong perspective. It doesn't believe in young people, or doesn't want young people transitioning between genders either socially or physically. It has quite a strong advocacy bent. It has a strong point of view or agenda. And the fact that they're involved in the story in some way wasn't flagged by RNZ. It wasn't said. It wasn't owned up to, it wasn't transparent about that fact, and so that's come under criticism as well. I mean, it's obviously the parent's story to tell, and so you don't want to say they can't tell it, but the involvement of this group does give it a particular, colours it in some ways, because they are obviously coming to it with a particular agenda.
Compounding this situation, an ongoing coronial process around Alex's death.
Yes, and this is an issue because RNZ tried to contact a bunch of the organisations that had involvement in Alex and his care, and all of them said, we cannot comment because this coronial process is ongoing. And this kind of matters because there are really serious allegations in the story, including from the parents. They seem to think that these organisations were more interested in affirming Alex's gender identity than in treating his eating disorder. That's a pretty scandalous claim, if that is the case. None of these agencies can actually respond to it, or they could respond to it, but it almost never happens when a coronial inquiry is going on. You won't have agencies comment. And RNZ would have known that essentially they were giving, in essence, a free hit here, that these agencies wouldn't respond to it. It also limited the number of people that could speak up for Alex, I guess, or that knew him, that had interacted with him in his life. And so none of these agencies really wanted to speak because this coronial inquiry is ongoing, and when these findings aren't out, you don't want to predetermine them or put your own perspective in there or have a debate ahead of them. So I don't know. It's not like RNZ can't report ahead of a coronial inquiry, but it did limit exactly how many perspectives the story could have, and that was a real problem with it.
How, in summary, how, as RNZ's media analyst, do you think RNZ should have gone about reporting this, if at all? Or, I mean, reporting this. It's not the reporting of Alex's death; it's the perspective of Alex's parents. It's sharing their perspective on the story, which is different from a straight reporting, right?
Yes, and you say, well, this is Alex's parents' story. Well, it is and it isn't. It's also Alex's story.
Yeah.
And they wanted their story told in a particular way in life. And they fought for that. It's very clear, even from Ruth Hill's story, that they fought for that at great personal cost. They moved out of their parents' home in part because of conflicts over their gender identity. They wanted it to be affirmed. And this person has suffered and died. And now to say you're going to print a story misgendering them, using a female name for them, it feels like that could be interpreted. And I think RNZ should have thought about this. It feels like an insult to them, and that feels like a really hard thing for a media organisation to do. Yes, it is the parent's story, but it's also his story. And so I don't know. It's a really hard one to report, and I think it has to be done because there are real failings, it seems, at the heart of this. And so you report on those failings for sure, but this story has become about gender identity, and I think that is probably a bit of a shame.
There will doubtless be more to come in that wider story over the coming weeks and months, you would think.
Yes, and this will go on because there will be a coronial inquiry. We know that David Fisher from the Herald also has some of the information that was given to David Farrier. That's apparently the case, and that story might be coming out as well. So there might be more on this to come. We will see. RNZ is also getting media inquiries from David Farrier, for instance, about why it reported the way it did. So maybe there'll be more to come on Webworm as well.
Let's talk about NZME.
NZME, there's always an NZME.
There's always an NZME
update every single week.
Yes, we haven't returned to the jingle. Probably, well, to Colin's relief.
To everyone's relief, really. Let's face it, Emile.
Last time you mentioned some sound issues on the Herald now, the new product from the Herald. Have they been resolved?
Now, I'm sorry to say to you, Emile, that Colin has detected another one. This one didn't come from me. This came from Colin. Here it is.
Netanyahu wants Donald Trump to be involved in this war. Paul Buchanan is a former intelligence and defence policy analyst and consultant to the US government. He's with us this morning. Paul, good morning. Paul, what is the risk of this? Yes, I can hear you, Paul. It sounds like the line is a little dodgy, but we'll keep going. Paul, what is the risk of this escalating further? We're going to have to come back to Paul. It sounds like we're on the line.
It could happen to anyone, Emile.
It's happened to me.
It's unkind for Colin even pointing it out.
It is.
And I don't know what kind of jerk would highlight it on the radio.
Ryan Bridge.
Nights, for instance.
Poor old Ryan Bridge. He's got a pretty exhausting schedule too, doesn't he?
I don't envy him, I have to say. Up at 5 a.m. every day for News Talk ZB's early edition. Then he's over to the Herald studio to front Herald now at 7 a.m. And I have to say it's an admirable effort, Emile. Sometimes it's hard to keep track of what you're thinking when you're being pulled from pillar to post like that. So, for instance, 5 days ago, Ryan Bridge was saying this about the economy.
Thank you to our exporters. Thank you to global conditions. There is light at the end of the tunnel, and you can feel it and you can see it. Shops are busier than they were a year ago. Manufacturing is on the up. The data says so. Companies are hiring. And this is massive for Luxon because it means his rhetoric is starting to match our reality.
Yeah, and then a couple of days ago, he was just giving a slightly different assessment in response to a few more numbers that had come out.
Yesterday, it was Mayday calls from the services sector going backwards for the month again. This time, a bigger drop than last, and again, way out of whack with our trading partners. And our golden dairy run will continue. Don't worry, I'm not saying that won't. But there are signs, early signs, that production is going to be ramping up around the world, and of course that affects the price, brings it down. Cutting rates sooner and faster would help avoid any surgical complications as we revive the economy, which has been, let's face it, a very sick patient for a very long time.
Well, two truths can coexist peacefully. A person can be sick but on the mend.
Yin and yang, light and dark. I think you're right there.
Avatar: The Last Airbender.
It's a sick patient, but with green shoots coming out of it. It's sick. It's on the hospital bed, but also it's looking at the running track and thinking maybe I'll bound along it.
Just a matter of months.
Just a matter of months and years and weeks and decades and centuries, perhaps. Look, I can totally get it. Like I don't think they're that in conflict, to be honest with you, Emile. It's one of those things with the economy. You get different sets of numbers every day, and the ones 2 days ago you have to come up with a take to suit them, and then 2 days later there's different ones you got to come up with a take to suit them.
It's the take economy. Don't hate the player, hate the game.
It's stressful out there. Like this guy has a stressful job. He's not you sitting there all neutral, a neutral face in his plush studio going, oh, that sounds interesting, but I couldn't possibly come up with a view. He's coming up with a view on everything every day, and that is hard work. His U-turns as well, they do not, they pale in comparison to some of my favourite ones from the COVID era. So I just want to play you Heather du Plessis-Allen's. This one's her first one on David Clark, Health Minister at the time, from April 3, 2020.
The Health Minister doesn't deserve to be fired, but he should be fired.
Okay, that's one take. And
Pretty
then what did Heather du Plessis-Allen have to say 4 days later?
Prime Minister executed perfect political judgment today. She made the right call. She didn't have to fire David Clark, so she didn't. And actually firing David Clark probably would have done her more harm than good.
Good point. It's the take economy. It's a different set of data every day. You've got to come up with a take for the listeners so they don't change the channel
every day,
just the radio dial.
Every day a new opportunity.
Yeah.
A couple of quick ones to finish. Returning to RNZ, we got an email a couple of days ago, didn't we?
Yes. I don't really have too much to say about this, but RNZ got a budget cut in the budget, 7%, I believe it is, so they're doing voluntary redundancies.
Yeah, they've sent out an email asking about voluntary redundancies. It was interesting. I don't know whether this happened to you. I imagine that it did. Shortly after the news of that broke more widely, my phone started blowing up with texts from people who'd been through voluntary redundancy saying, if you want to get together and have a talk about the environment of voluntary redundancy.
So there's a lot of voluntary redundancies that have taken place. No one has texted me.
Oh, right.
I guess they assume that I'm going to stay here forever and rot into the seats. Sort of meld with them.
Meld with them, yeah, like Homer Simpson. And you wanted just finally to credit the urban blog Greater Auckland for a good scoop of sorts.
Yeah, they actually used the IAA, I guess, to source cabinet papers from the light rail era. And it was always a bit of a mystery exactly how Labour stuffed that up quite so much. And one of the things that urban people have always said, urban people as I call them, is that it should have been a cheaper surface level option rather than the tunnelled one, the very expensive tunnelled one that Labour eventually proposed. And so the blog Greater Auckland used the cabinet documents to try and figure out exactly what happened here. It turns out that Michael Wood, who was the Transport Minister back in the day, actually wanted surface level light rail along with Grant Robertson, who was a Finance Minister, probably wanted something cheap. It seems, well, in Greater Auckland's view, that a captain's call was made from very high up, perhaps Jacinda Ardern herself, to go with the tunnelled option. So that was a mystery solved by Greater Auckland. Shout out to them. Good journalists, even though they're doing it in their spare time.
Hayden Down, thank you.
Thank you, Emile.
Coming up after the news at 9 o'clock, we are talking about the technological developments in military technology over the past few decades. And of course, it is the RNZ Nights quiz. Stay tuned.